Hello and welcome to, what's the name of the show?
NewsReal,
Oh, yeah.
Joe. NewsReal,
Yeah.
as opposed to fake news.
Mm.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah,
Hi, Scotty.
that's what we're doing. I forgot there for a moment.
Scotty's here. Joe's here. I'm
I'm so
here.
distracted.
Where are we going to start?
Everywhere.
Everywhere and
All at
nowhere.
once. Everywhere all at once.
God.
Do it all. Sum it all up in one paragraph. And then we'll just end.
Austria and Australia sound kind of similar, don't they?
Are we talking about that COVID again? Can we talk about something more interesting? No, I'm just kidding.
Bring it on. I have other things to talk about, but...
No, yeah. Well, it's like, it's obviously, I mean...
Well, COVID is now like the
People-
background, it's the wallpaper. It's
Yeah,
everywhere.
Right. Well, people are, it's interesting, because it does dominate the news. And, I mean, we obviously touch on it, and sometimes more than touch on it every week, and have done for quite a while now.
Immerse ourselves.
Well, and, but the problem is that's what most people are thinking about. We could do a show on cute animals and stuff, or, I mean, we'll mention that pyroclastic cloud that came down on the volcano in Indonesia there
Yeah.
during the week,
I saw that,
kind
yeah.
of stuff. But there's not enough of that stuff going on. You know what I mean? That would be
Do you want yeah.
that would be light relief from COVID for me anyway. Volcanoes erupting and other things. That would be more interesting than COVID, because it is getting a bit tiresome. But maybe the whole point of it is that it's meant to tire people out, right? So they just resign themselves to this being the new normal and
Yeah.
just suck it up and get your shot and get the vaccine and shut up. But it is all across the media, right? With the kind of exception of, if you look at all the Western English media, i.e. UK, covering Europe and the rest of the world, it's all, every headline, and has been for the past almost 2 years now, has been COVID in there on the headline somewhere, and almost all of the coverage has been COVID, because they cover the whole world, right? With the exception of America, because America has, obviously, they report on that, but they have other things going on in America that are seen as being as important. I mean, in Europe, you have, the only other thing that's up there with the COVID thing is migrants, now and again, but that's iffy, that's now and again.
Uh-huh.
But in the US, you've had the whole Trump legacy thing, and white supremacy, and racism,
The
and
culture war.
that thing is still going quite strong in America, because
Yeah.
I mean that's where it was the strongest. So it's taken the headlines quite a lot as well, And an example will be like what we were going to mention,
Well,
the Tiki torches.
we'll go straight to it, because it happened today. I think
Yesterday,
it looks
was it?
okay. It's maybe yesterday. We'll go straight to it. But yeah, I just want to add to that.
Saturday.
Everything is through the prism of COVID. So even if it's an unrelated topic, it seems it still frames through that, because how can it not be? If society's been completely it's been reset, to use their word.
Mhm.
So that's the great switcheroo that's taken place. They would
Right.
like all to accept that this is the new normal, and preferably not talk about it. They as far as they're concerned, this is not a political issue. They keep saying this. This is everywhere, and it is off the political table.
And they're going to keep beating people with it until it becomes the new normal, right? But then
Yeah.
it'll never go away. That's what people. That's one of the supposed contract was. And Jordan Peterson actually mentioned this, and he said it. We never played it, but when he was talking in one of his interviews, whatever, about him getting the vaccine, he says, "Well, I got the vaccine, but the deal with the vaccine was, I'll get the vaccine." Talking to the government, "I'll get the vaccine, and you leave me the fuck alone."
Uh-huh.
Stupid me. That didn't happen. So the idea that's a direct quote, by the way. I'm not just
Yeah, he swore. Unusual for
cursing
him.
spuriously or
Yeah, that was his last
flavor.
interview with Ruben. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but even if people were to accept this whole COVID business, it would never go away, because it's seen as a tool to keep people, put pressure on
Well,
people, keep people pressured, right? So I don't think, and that's part of the problem, is people think and signed on to it. A lot of people probably resonated, if they saw it, resonated with that sentiment of Peterson. Okay, I got the vaccine. Is it over now? No, it's not over. So it doesn't matter how much you comply. The whole appeasement with Hitler in the Second World War,
Uh-huh.
that was a bad thing back then. And appeasement of the powers that be today is just as bad. It doesn't change anything, it seems. That's a kind of recurring theme throughout history. Like thing, when you appease a tyrant, he just sees it as more reason to turn the screws on you more.
Can I propose two things and you tell me which is more likely? In the US, maybe Canada as well, maybe if you want to broaden out the Anglosphere broadly, you still have other stories. There are other events that are not COVID related. Okay, so here's my proposal. One of two. Which is it? Is that because the government / media / whatever system there is just making an effort to distract people from it? Or is that because in those countries, they still have enough of a much broader
I think so.
they're still making more of a fuss about it.
I think that's the case in the US.
And they're trying to say, look, there's more important things on the table to
Yeah.
discuss right here now.
And it would depend nationally, but obviously you can spread it out beyond the Western world or the first world or the world, if you know what I mean, which is, for a lot of people, is Europe and America. You go to other countries in South America and Asia and stuff, and if you look at them specifically, you'll probably see that there's not a lot of reports of COVID in their local newspapers because they do have, depending on the country, have other national issues that are going on that are more important, right? But I suppose Europe has lived so high in the hog and has been so free from problems, really. I mean, after terrorism went away because of COVID, that there's nothing else to talk about, right? There's no other pressing issues, you know, and that's what the media is using to get clickbait, and the government is using it to, you know, program the minds of the population, keep them afraid, controlled, all that kind of stuff. But in the US, I think the difference is, there's other issues, guns. There was a shooting just there in Chicago during the week. 4 or 5 kids shot in a Chicago school. That's obviously, the gun thing is a debate type thing, and that obviously is tied to white supremacy and all that kind of stuff, racism, culture wars, like you said. But it's also in the US that is also, COVID doesn't dominate the headlines quite as much as in Europe, although the leftist media tends to want to make it dominate, but it doesn't, I think, because America is so, well, it's 50 states, right? And look at Florida, look at Texas. I mean, people are calling Florida now the free state of Florida. You know, I live in the free state of Florida where none of that applies, you know what I mean? So certainly it's probably not across the Florida media, right? Or local Florida newspapers, and Texas as well, and a few other states in the US, you know? So it's, that's one of the advantages of the US, you know? And it's weird, like, that the US is one country for quite a long time, a couple of 100 years. But there's more independence between states in the US than there is apparently between most of the European states, which were all really
Stitched
independent
together
countries
10 years ago.
more than 20 years ago, you know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. But anyway, so what about the Tiki torches? There's 2 Tiki torches that combine white supremacy in America and COVID in Europe, right? But we'll get to the COVID in Europe one afterwards. But what's the first white supremacy Tiki torches reference?
Yesterday, some group was marching on Capitol Hill
Some group.
in Washington called the Patriot Front.
Oh yeah.
Never heard of it.
No. One of those
think
really
anyone's ever heard.
never before heard of group.
Before we show it, though, we should say that during the week we were looking back and laughing at how freaking idiotic that thing in 2017 was. The Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville.
You will not
replace
us. Jews will not replace us. And then they ran out of things that rhymed with you and Jew.
So they just repeated
So they
it.
just repeated it over again. Jews will not. Jews.
Like, and it was supposed to be like a rallying call for whites in America. It was absurd.
Fear in the heart of the enemy of freedom.
And it did.
Which,
you know, the liberati.
CNN.
The
enemy of freedom.
CNN, Jonathan Haidt, as I showed, shat his pants. You know, the intellects of the intellects in America
that last week
collectively shat their pants. You know, took it as a real, legit, oh God, this is a genuine snapshot of the state of, you know, politics in our country.
Yeah.
But it was obviously ridiculous. Now, last month, it's very recent, something happened where there was the governor's race in Virginia, same state as Charlottesville. And somebody rolled up to the campaign bus of the right-wing Republican candidate and just posed for the press. 3 guys, 1 black, 2 whites, sunglasses, white shirts, khaki pants, and tiki torches that were unlit because it was pissing rain.
Yeah.
Just standing there drenched, sunglasses. It took only like a little bit of sleuthing. It was within 24 hours, people figured out that they were actually sent there by Project Lincoln, which is a sort of ultra lefty tied to the Democratic Party group to smear, to paint Youngkin, the Republican candidate, as of the far right.
Kind of echoes of that what's his name?
Jussie Smollett,
Jussie Smollett
which is
situation,
currently his trial is on at the
or the
moment.
many instances of like people in even today in recent years, activists, left-wing activists on campuses around the US writing Nazi slogans on the campuses in order to prove the extreme right influence at the university, but it's a radical lefty that's doing it to try and make a reality of what they believe to be a reality. They try to make the reality. And there's been a long history of kind of disaffected or a bit slightly crazy or maybe not so crazy Jews doing that as well to try and highlight the problem of anti-Semitism. And they look around and they say, well, there isn't much anti-Semitism around here. I'm going to make some as a Jew in order to highlight how I feel that there's a lot of anti-Semitism.
That happens a lot in Paris, in the US, and the East Coast.
Yeah.
And when caught, not whether the Jewish or far lefty activists and other causes, when caught, they always have the same story. It's like, I know I did it, but obviously I did it to highlight the fact that,
it's just that you're not
this
seeing
thing
it.
is out there.
That could happen any minute now. I did it, but it could have been a Nazi that did it.
You didn't know until you called me that I wasn't a Nazi for real.
Yeah, exactly. I could have been a Nazi. So it's like, in France, there were Jews going around,
An
a few
elderly couple.
A few instances of them actually desecrating Jewish cemeteries. And putting,
Graffiti, smashing the
slogans,
headstones.
It's crazy stuff. But, I mean, it's lucky that now and again it gets found out that that's what is actually going on. So at least it allows for some doubt as to whether those kind of claims are legitimate that need to be investigated, But what about so the latest one was a bunch of 100 of them marching on Capitol Hill. What
Do you have
called?
video? I have video.
Yeah.
Well, we guess.
Well, let's just watch it, see what.
This was. I guess I can't remember. I think it was like Unite the Right Redux attempt.
Right, just out of nowhere.
Yeah, who
They
knows?
obviously got approval
I'm sure
for
there's
it.
some backstory. They got approval because it's on Capitol Hill. I've sent it to Scotty, so we'll see it in a sec. And I read their Wikipedia page, which we're going to refer to in a minute. Turn the sound on. They're marching in their boots to create that sound effect. It's the jack boots marching.
Yeah. No tiki torches though.
They have a drummer though.
Yeah.
There he is. Good man. Keep up, do keep up.
The battle hymn of the Republic.
And the US flags are upside down, and they're carried, of course, from the front, like as if to suggest it's a far right thing when you carry the flag like that, And if anyone's, not sure about their race or what they're at, they're all wearing white balaclavas. And there's a few other such videos going around, and of course, people they spot it right away. FedFest, obviously this is.
Did you see
not
the other one where at the
legit.
end of the day when they tried to get away?
No.
There's another one where they tried to, when they're leaving, when they're wrapping it up, they did whatever they were doing, did their little march and were wrapping it up, and a bunch of U-Haul trucks come to take them away. Well, one U-Haul truck comes, right? So they rented a truck, and they all empty one, they all pile in the back of it. But for some reason, there's other people there who are. One of them actually says those guys are feds, definitely, and they're kind of attacking them, as if claiming that they're basically it's a setup, right? It's like basically the FBI, because there's a whole meme going, not a meme, but the idea is going around right now that, which is probably true, that the Capitol Hill riot was provoked to some extent. The entrance, at least to Congress, was provoked by, members of the FBI in amongst the Capitol Hill rioters. So that's a big thing amongst conservative Americans right now, that they're being manipulated in that way. As soon as they see something like this, even their own supporters, in a certain sense, or people that might support what they're doing, are suspicious that that's basically being orchestrated by the FBI to make them look bad. So the whole idea of an agent provocateur, the general idea, is really
It has common currency now.
Yeah, it's starting to pervade the whole discourse, Yeah, but they all jumped in a bunch of U-Haul trucks, or one U-Haul truck, and wasn't enough to take them all away. So the U-Haul truck had to do several runs back and forth to throw them all in the back and take them away again. It's bizarre. Like, I mean, that's the whole, it is obviously strange, you know, and weird, you know, that they would do that. You know, it has this element of being sinister. You know what I mean? There's no speeches. They're not saying anything. They're just marching in silence in this kind of military formation.
Yeah.
And that's obviously designed to convey a certain message, right?
Yeah.
But it definitely is possible that there's someone. I'm not saying all those guys that we just saw in the video there are all working for the FBI, but all it would take would be a couple of FBI people to have, over the past couple of years, set up a group like this, collected a bunch of adherents, and then you can maneuver them.
They know that the one of the co-founders of Proud Boys is an FBI informant for sure. They also know that that militia group, the border one, name escapes. The Oath Keepers was also set up by someone at the outset. It's not that they come in later and go and get an informant. That's COINTELPRO, where you hijack a movement afterwards. But from the get-go, Oath Keepers was counterintelligence. Redux, the modern version, where they just create the group. They don't try and overtake it to keep the country stable. They create it to destabilize the public backlash against the government, you know.
Well, it's actually exactly the same as, like, we were saying of people who go around, like leftists who would go around and put Nazi slogans on campuses to try and, you know, show or to set the debate, or to demonize your opposition, or to show just how bad things are in the country right now.
And to activate people both ways, to get them to go, if you're of left inclination, go extreme there, and then vice versa,
Yeah, but I think the rationale behind the FBI doing it isn't necessarily to sow some kind of, to seed some kind of discord in the culture war, to exacerbate it or bring it to a point of, you know, open conflict. It's more like the rationale in terms of their policy, FBI, and this is a long-standing policy, the way they explain it to themselves, is that, listen, these kind of groups are going to form, or in the process of forming, all by themselves. If we don't form them and have them under our control, then groups will form that are not under our control.
Yeah.
So in order to safeguard security in the country, we need to actually create these groups. I mean, it has so many tie-ins with terrorism.
It's a great plausible narrative,
you know,
and it's carried them for decades.
For sure. You know, it even extends to, it's a weird mentality. It extends to the COVID business, right? And gain-of-function research. It's exactly the same mentality behind gain-of-function research. That at some point in the future, a virus might jump from an animal to humans. It hasn't happened, and we don't know the likelihood of it happening, but it could happen, and we don't know what it would do or what the effect would be. Therefore, we need to create that mutated virus, or that virus that, you know, with extra souped up powers. Basically, we need to gain a function research on a virus, like add to a virus to make it transmissible to humans, to see what happens. Not, of course, they stop at the stage of
just so
spreading
we know.
it.
It's just so we know, and you'll be more comfortable if we know,
right?
But you know that we know.
But you can see how it's exactly the same mentality, right? So the FBI says we need to create these groups, because if we don't, at some point in the future, they're going to be created by others, and we won't have control over it. So we need to create them, but then that means we have control over them, so we can make sure that, you know, there's no outbreak of violence, or it doesn't turn into some kind of a revolution or some kind of a class war or a civil war or anything like that. We can contain it all. Same with viruses. We soup up the virus, but we just keep it controlled. We don't release it, right? And the FBI doesn't release their hordes of white supremacists and start a civil war, and the scientists don't release their gain-of-function virus to cause a pandemic. But do they? Is that always an option? Is that kept on the back burner as a possibility? That's the big question, because you're right at the edge there. You're right up to the line.
Yeah.
You know, and in terms,
it's a perennial function of government. The stay-behind units during the Cold War.
Yeah.
NATO would bring it right to the line by funding and supplying weaponry, bombing equipment to far leftist groups in Europe. While training cadres of ostensibly right-wing militias, underground, practice, have target practice now and again, keep the weapons in storage, move them around from place to place, in the eventuality that if the Russians ever invade the Soviets or whatever, Western Europe, we're ready
But you
to have stay-behind units.
Right.
They're behind the front lines of the invading Russian horde.
But
the scenario never happened.
Right, but it went further than that if you look deeper into it, like, what do you call it? Daniela Ganser wrote a book on it, Strategy of Tension, which was this idea they had of, so they didn't just stop at the point of having this cadre of anti-communist, anti-communist groups in Europe waiting for the Soviet invasion. If it ever happened, what they did was they used those groups to act in the name of Soviet Russia by planting bombs and claiming that it was by some Soviet supporting group in Western Europe in order to change public opinion or make sure that public opinion stayed anti-Soviet.
Yeah.
So that once you formulate that idea, then you cross that line into committing acts of terrorism or bombings on the country. You cross that line to releasing a gain-of-function modified virus. You don't keep it in the lab, you release it in order to see what would happen, or to control, or to affect something, to have some political...
Here's a horrifying thought. It took 30 years for Strategy of Tension to basically get its way through the courts in Italy, where it was first mentioned by a quote-unquote far-right fascist with ties to Italian intelligence and therefore the CIA. 30-some years before that was, got the attention it deserves. So it's kind of admitted long after the fact. Here's a horrible thought. What if it's going to take 30 years before they acknowledge something to the effect that, yes, we did release the COVID, and we did it because, as you can tell looking at any of the statistics, we knew it was not particularly fatal, but it was the perfect way to prepare the population for such an eventuality as we ever did have an actually catastrophic Black Plague type death pandemic. So were we harming you, or were we looking out for you all?
Yeah.
They'll always have that answer.
Yeah.
That's what's horrible
about
it.
That's that's an entirely plausible
long-term game.
Well,
a fallback thing they can, if they're okay, you got me. Well, here's why we did it.
Yeah, it's an entirely plausible scenario those people probably do have had and do have in their minds, and it's a mainstay of that kind of thinking in political and quote-unquote elite circles for quite a long time.
If we hadn't done it, you would not have been prepared for lockdowns when the actual one came. Right.
All of the structures are in place now for a pandemic.
Yeah.
So you can justify it. Yeah, if you're pathological enough, you can justify anything. Like, you can, like Samantha Power or the U.S. State Department, and it's what's it called? Right to protect, humanitarian interventions, bombing people to save them. We're going to save you to death. We're doing it for your own good.
Yeah, because he's killing his own people, but you later find out he isn't. And
it's actually us that we're killing those people. Anyway,
where do you want to go next? I mean,
Tiki torches. Yeah. Tiki torches. We're no tiki torches in that. People want tiki torches now. So where are the tiki torches? Show us.
I have to look for it because I have video of Merkel speaking.
Okay, well, throw that up.
Maybe we'll see it in the background.
Yeah.
Okay, let's have a look.
Merkel's always good for a laugh.
Are you kidding? She's 17 years in power. Well, she's finally left this week.
She's worse than Putin, almost.
Worse than Putin?
For being that long in power. That's a sign of a dictator.
I know. How do you square that circle? Like, anyone who stays in power beyond 8 years is an evil dictator with tyrannical intentions and wants to be king, except Merkel.
Because she's a frumpy housefrau.
Okay.
She can't be a dictator.
She finally left. She finally let go of the chancellorship in Germany.
Yeah.
And on Thursday evening, she gave a farewell address to their nation at the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. Let's have watch you listen. It's got subs here now.
Und zur Selbstkorrektur. Sie lebt vom steten Ausgleich der Interessen und von dem Respekt voreinander. Sie lebt von Solidarität und Vertrauen Im Übrigen auch von dem Vertrauen in Fakten und davon, dass überall da, wo wissenschaftliche Erkenntnis geleugnet, Verschwörungstheorien und Hetze verbreitet werden,
Conspiracy
Widerspruch
theories.
laut werden muss. Nun wird es an der nachfolgenden Regierung liegen, Antworten auf die vor uns liegenden Herausforderungen zu finden und unsere Zukunft zu gestalten.
Quack, quack.
Hierfür wünsche ich Ihnen, lieber Olaf Scholz, und der von Ihnen geführten Bundesregierung alles, alles Gute und eine glückliche Hand und viel Erfolg. Ich bin überzeugt, dass wir die Zukunft auch weiterhin dann gut
What is she on
gestalten
about here?
können, wenn wir uns nicht mit Missmut, mit Missgunst, mit Pessimismus, sondern,
Pessimismus.
wie ich vor 3 Jahren in einem anderen Rahmen gesagt habe,
I hate
mit
pessimismus.
Fröhlichkeit im Herzen an die Arbeit machen. So jedenfalls habe ich es immer für mich gehalten. In meinem Leben in der DDR und
The
erst
joy in
recht
my heart. Did
und
you ever
umso
look like
mehr
she was
unter den
joyful?
Bedingungen der Freiheit.
What is the point of
Es
this?
ist diese Fröhlichkeit im Herzen,
What's she actually
die
saying?
uns allen und im übertragenen Sinne unserem Land auch
Well-
für die Zukunft wünsche.
Okay, you can
Danke
stop it there.
Ihnen
That's just her
von
leaving.
Herzen.
From the bottom of my heart. See you later.
She's leaving. She's saying she's rallying the troops, so to speak, not literally the population. As I go, she's saying, I want to remind you all that we must stay united against conspiracy theories and always trust the science.
Yeah.
Obviously, she's without mentioning the C word. She's talking about the COVID.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Now,
Oblique references. Well,
in the
she's-
24 hours before the speech,
Well, she made a reference there to it's up to the new Chancellor now to find answers to the challenges that we confront. If you throw up the Star Tribune, Scotty, this is from, well, it's a few days ago, but obviously this guy, the new Chancellor that Merkel just referenced there, he's got some answers to the challenges that confront us.
right?
And that's a vaccine. So Germany's designated Chancellor backs COVID vaccine mandate for everybody.
Yeah, which Merkel just drew up just before she left.
And handed it over to him.
Yeah.
So, and this is meant to be on. Going to be. He's going to say that he's in support of it, and in February they're going to have a vote.
Yeah,
But he expects that it will pass.
yeah.
So February seems to be a date that a lot of them have actually glommed onto as
Yeah.
when we need to do certain things mostly in terms of vaccine mandates.
Beginning with Austria.
Yeah, well, US, a couple of days ago, they were meant to have this vaccine mandate. Again, America, you know why we make fun of America for being, we kind of like, we make fun of it, or have made fun of it a lot in the past about freedom. America, freedom, so much freedom.
Freedom isn't
taste of
free. It
liberty.
costs folks like you and me.
Freedom isn't
Yeah.
free, all that kind of stuff. Well, I mean, we've made fun of that in the past, drawing comparisons to how, what do they mean by freedom, all that kind of stuff. But when it came,
When it comes down
when
to
the
it.
rubber hit the road, like in terms of this COVID business, it does seem to be standing
Uh-huh.
head and shoulders above a lot of other countries, particularly in the free West, in terms of maintaining at least some semblance of, we mentioned Florida and Texas, maintaining some semblance of freedoms, because Biden wanted to do the healthcare mandate. It was meant to be a couple of days ago, 3rd of December, I think, or something like that. All healthcare workers were meant to be, there was a vaccine mandate meant to be imposed for all healthcare workers. That's been challenged in the courts, and it's having some success, so that has been put on hold. And there's also January 5th, there was meant to be the Biden's mandate for all employees of companies with more than 100 employees. We're meant to be, forced vaccinations or mandated vaccinations. That's been challenged in the courts and is meeting with some success. So that's been put on hold as well.
Yeah, you're referring to the Sixth Circuit Court, which put the kibosh on it 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Now, but it's not the end of the story, because
No.
the government's coming back with motions, and there's all kinds of process. They try and get this in and that in. This week, the Biden regime
My God, don't say that.
filed a motion to move jurisdiction of this to a different court in Washington, D.C.
Uh-huh.
And this Sixth Court, wherever it's actually physically located,
We're going to load
I
the-
don't know, to be honest,
Gonna load the
said
court.
no. But so they're trying, they're not giving up, and there's more to come on that. So
But already
at least there's a battle taking place.
Already some fairly big healthcare service providers, like the companies that are, run hospitals. There's one in Florida just recently said has 83,000 staff, like healthcare staff, and they said that they're dropping the COVID mandate thing. So that's obviously on the heels of these court decisions to stall or to not approve Biden's federal order or mandate, the government mandate. So, yeah.
It is a fundamental difference. The central government in the United States is genuinely subject to other branches of government.
Right. And also to the
Not
states.
in all cases, because we're pretty sure that something squirrely happened with the election last year. But in general, it remains the case that there is...
And also the independence of states.
Independence of states, three branches of government, etc., competing interests coming through different parts of the bureaucracy, through myriad different agencies. So it's so vast that... And there is this big honking freedom streak that runs through the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's not quite north, south, east, west. It's more generally like heartland versus the coastal elite states, if you're going to put a geographic marker on it. But it cuts through everything. Whereas in other countries, they just went right over people's heads and announced by decree X, Y, Z.
Yeah. Austria.
You mentioned Austria.
Czech Republic is also doing.
Germany's talking about it.
Austria mandate from. I think it's from. Is it immediate? Yeah, it's immediate. I don't know. Maybe it's next month. It's where everybody, or maybe it's February again. That
I'm pretty sure Austria is. They say by February 1st.
February 1st, but yes, they've got a couple of months. But they're already locked down all the unvaccinated, supposedly. Although they kind of locked down everybody then after that. So it's
So there's some tag. There's obviously some somewhere in Europe. There's some central administration of this rollout going on, because when I saw Austria do it first, I thought, well, okay, that's my hunch was they've chosen Austria because they would ordinarily have done this through Germany, but they get to hide behind the indigenous, spontaneous, organic, small, minor country choosing to do this. Right. And then Germany could go, what is that? That is a very good idea. We will take that 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, it's Germany's saying, same thing. Merkel's last actual act, I mean, the mandate is, theoretical, so at the moment, officially. But in practice, her last actual act was to lock down the unvaccinated.
Right.
To follow Austria in that move. So that's currently what just happened. That's her final act. And that's probably why I played the speech, because the speech is about, democracy and freedom. And, keeping the country united, and those who would divide us with the conspiracy theories and smear campaigns. She just basically split the country down the middle. And there's some actual great footage of that, to that literal effect. You go into shopping malls in some places in Germany right now, they just put up like fences down the middle of the mall. On one side you're vaxxed, and the other you're unvaxxed. And it's having a knock-on spontaneous effect in the population. I saw that you tweeted something earlier this week where someone put a side-by-side of graffiti or whatever is painted window in 1940 or 1930, whatever it was, Jews not welcome. And there's literally shop windows where people have either put up paper notices or they put it on their windows, the shopkeepers themselves, unvaxxed, not welcome.
Yeah.
So that's their final act, is to literally make Germany Hitler again.
Yeah.
All the while going out, believing in her freaking mind that everything she'd done down to her last act is to keep the Hitler thing at bay.
Yeah.
I mean, who can believe that?
Yeah.
How mental are you to believe that?
Well, I don't know. It's some kind of sickness. You have to start looking at the pathology of it, or the clinical pathology of it, if you know what I mean, in terms of there has to be something medical, if only kind of psychological, going on a mass scale around, not everywhere, but in some places over a large percentage of the population of most countries, let's say, or in the countries that we're talking about. There's some kind of a psychological pathologization of the population going on.
Yeah.
That's what happened. I mean, we can maybe talk about that a bit later, but certainly that's what is a good explanation for what's happened over the past 18 months to 2 years, and it has had that kind of effect on the people, on a lot of the people, not everybody. Czech Republic is also doing. Greece and the Czech Republic both doing. You talk about small states. Greece and the Czech Republic and Europe
Yeah.
both doing already
I
done
have.
deal mandated vaccines for over 60s. In
Yeah.
Greece, if you don't get the vaccine over 60, fines.
I
100
have
euros a
the
month.
PM announcing that, the Greek PM. We're just, hopefully it's just to the point, but we don't play that one, Scotty. Maybe he's rambling, but I think he spits it out in a minute or less.
Άνω των 60 ετών που δεν έχουν εμβολιαστεί.
Okay, there are subs here again.
Πρέπει έως τις 16 Ιανουαρίου
By the 16th of January, you must be vaccinated.
έχουν κλείσει
Book an appointment here first.
το
Chat, yeah.
ραντεβού τους,
Right.
να κάνουν την πρώτη δόση, θα έχουν απόλυτη προτεραιότητα στο σύστημα για να εμβολιαστούν πρώτοι. Διαφορετικά, κάθε μήνα
If you're not vaxxed by then,
επιβάλλεται διοικητικό πρόστιμο 100 ευρώ
you get a fine of 100 euros for every month or day after that you're not vaxxed. He says it's not a punishment.
It's not a punishment. Yeah.
What is it then?
It's a good beating. It's not a punishment.
The Greek PM says this is an act of justice for those who have been vaccinated.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Because there is a real element of vengeance in the viciousness on the other side of this debate. And he's saying that he's going to have a lot of people. He's a smart politician. He knows that's the sentiment. You know, we need to get these mofos vaxxed, stab them, jab them, whatever it takes.
For what it's worth, for me, there's a palpable sense amongst a lot of these politicians, and they're all reading from the same hymn sheet as we've seen, that they're really behind the scenes. And a lot of them try to hide it. Some of them don't hide it so well, like some governors in Australia are like literally almost spitting mad when they're talking about vaccines. But there's a palpable sense that all of them are really, really pissed off, angry that there are so many people, and it is a significant percentage of the population, maybe 10, 20%, that's still a lot of people. You're
A
talking
third,
about-
I think.
yeah,
in most countries.
not vaccinated, but in terms of the real resistors type thing, let's say 10, 15% or something like that. In Europe, you're talking about, 50 to 100 million people. And they're really not happy that these people are not tipping their hat and bowing down and saying, yes, thank you, sir.
I
for
know.
the
After so
vaccine."
much messaging,
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
We've been
There's-
going on about this for 2 years. How are they not
Right.
here with us yet?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe this. Which brings us to the European Union as a whole. Will we play what Ursula von der Leyen has to say about this? Von der Leyen?
Yeah, she's on there on the YouTube video, Scotty. I want to follow up on that.
Ex-German, before you play it, ex-German Minister of Defense under Merkel since last year or 2 years now, European Commission head.
So first of all, this is pure member state competence. Therefore, in respect to that, it's not me to give any kind of recommendation. If you're
However-
asking me what my personal position is, 2 or
Personal
3
position.
years ago,
Talk about that in a
I
minute.
would never have thought to witness what we see right now, that we have this horrible pandemic, we have the vaccines, the life-saving vaccines, but they are not being used adequately everywhere. And thus, this costs, of course, this is an enormous health cost coming along. If you look at the numbers, we have now 77% of the adults in the European Union vaccinated, or if you take the whole population, it's 66%. And this means 1/3 of the European population is not vaccinated. These are 150 million people. This is a lot.
Too much.
And not
Most of those are
each
kids,
and
though.
everyone can be vaccinated. So there are very small children, for example,
Third.
or people with special medical conditions, but the vast majority could. And therefore, I think it is understandable and appropriate to lead this discussion now, how we can encourage and potentially think about mandatory vaccination within the European Union. This needs discussion. This needs a common approach, but it is a discussion that I think has to be led.
It has to happen. Although that's just my personal
This is
opinion,
my
and
personal opinion.
I have no influence, and it's up to member states to do it. But this is what I think you should all do, and obviously they're going to take that and run with it, because that's a green light for them to then start talking about governments to start talking about it within each member state. But she talked about that's her personal position. Go to the Wikipedia page, Scotty, because we'll go to her personal Wikipedia page if we're talking about her personal position and her persona. blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's all a load of whatever. She's got a history. She's actually a doctor, which is interesting. She's a perfect person to be the head of the European Commission during a deadly pandemic. But on the right there, just down below her picture, just go to see her, where is it? Spouses. Her better half, or her other half, her worst half, I don't know. Heiko von der Leyen. Click on him. He is a German physician as well, a couple of doctors. Must be great dinner table conversation. And member of the noble family von der Leyen. He's a noble family. Anyway, more important, he's got a much smaller Wikipedia entry, but he's her husband, and since December 2020, it's an interesting date, he is a medical doctor of the US biotech company Orgenesis, which is specialized in cell and gene therapies.
Wow.
Orgenesis Inc. is a pioneering global biotech company committed to accelerating commercialization and transforming the delivery of cell and gene therapies while lowering costs. Orgenesis has a cell-based vaccine platform targeting
SARS-CoV-2.
And so that's what he's doing, and he just got appointed to that position as medical director of that biotech company that is developing treatments for SARS-CoV-2. And his wife is speaking to the entire European population, telling them that they all need to take some kind of mandated medication, preferably from my husband's company.
Preferable. What they've done in the EU, they have since the start given preference to the American gene vaccine.
Yeah. Well, they'll give extra special preference to her husband.
And it says when we were on the previous page, she took this position up in December 2019.
Yep.
I wonder
They're all
if it was
shoot
done.
in. It's great.
No conflicts of interest there. She's also,
None
of course,
at all.
gone viral. Since she made those statements, people picked out that last month, von der Leyen was at some awards ceremony with Alberto Bula, the head of Pfizer.
Alberto.
And they're seen hugging each other as they were both awarded, I don't know what, for their
Alberto
amazing performance during the pandemic.
Yeah, Alberto Mengele.
Wow.
Head
So
of Pfizer. Yeah.
that's her person. Did you notice at the very beginning of that, she said, if you'd asked me 2 years ago,
Yeah.
it takes a while to figure out what she's saying because she kind of makes a couple of subclauses. But I'm pretty sure my reading of it's correct. She said she is stunned that a third of the population is not on their sides at this point. Well, if you'd asked me 2 years ago that you'd have 2/3, I'd have been surprised, but not anymore after what I've seen the last year. But that, I think, is a genuine expression of surprise of someone in power where they're like, this doesn't compute. We're supposed to have 100%.
Why are they not complying?
Or if not 100% close to it,
Yeah.
a third of the people. She's genuinely shocked by
She
that
believed
discovery.
that they had much more power, that they had power over the entire population, and the strength of their propaganda and the methods, the influence they have over the population would surely have forced everyone to comply at this point. But I am very, very angry that 150 million people are not obeying my commands.
And a lot of them are kids, like I said.
Sometimes I am so angry, I beat up my husband when I go home.
And my hand starts to stiffen, and I don't know, put it down, down. Well, that's the thing, this has been all over the place. They've got reports, the media's got daily nonsense about this. Why are those people, those anti-vaxxers, they keep making comparisons with Nazi Germany and us? And it's like,
what's wrong with them?
what? No, you're the Nazis.
Yeah.
We're not the Nazis.
Not allowed to turn it around on us. Well, how long's it going to last?
How long's walking to last? This COVID hell year.
Yeah, well, the Brits have opined on that in the Telegraph. Scotty, in an article. It's a mention in this article, and but the article headline itself is very interesting. GPs are told to drop routine over 75s health checks to speed up COVID booster rollout. So this is protecting the vulnerable.
Protecting the elderly.
Protect the elderly vulnerable.
What do they mean by drop routine over 75?
Well, just drop them, like.
What, just do away with?
But Neil, understand, over 75s, what does that say?
The elderly.
And what happens to the elderly?
Well, they eventually die.
No, not eventually, Neil.
They
Very,
die.
very soon.
So we just discard them.
But that's always been the case. That's always been the attitude.
But the whole reason
Dry
for this
tinder?
entire fucking thing was protect the elderly.
But that's the ruse. That's the bullshit narrative that people were given. That caring, compassionate government cares about the elderly when forever they have treated the elderly as having one foot in the grave and who gives a shit and dumped them out of the hospital.
So they've now shafted them. They used them for a year and now they're just drop kicking
Sorry,
them.
you're not getting any routine health checks anymore.
Because they want to get boosters
into your kids.
into the kids.
Pretty much. But anyway, that's that article. But if you that's
Well, look at this. They're being shafted because they want to redirect primary healthcare into full-time boosters.
yeah.
Doctors
Doctors are just going to become booster givers
vaccine
forever.
machines.
And not forever, but for a considerable amount of time to come. Because if you scroll down, it comes under the graph. I think it is. It comes as documents. So these are documents released by SAGE, the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, which has been directing all of this bullshit, which is just a bunch of backroom bureaucrats and behavioral psychologists who have been directing this entire Pavlovian operation on the population. These people predict that it will take at least a further 5 years for COVID-19 to settle to a predictable endemic state. But that's not all. Next paragraph. The paper's by Spy M, which is a subgroup of SAGE. That's where, they smoke even more cigarettes in dark rooms than SAGE do, suggest that active management, that's a nice phrase, active management, including booster jabs and testing, could be needed for up to a decade.
A decade.
2 weeks to flatten the curve. But we couldn't have seen this coming.
Protect the elderly. Don't you care about Granny? Shut up. Get inside your home. Don't move. What are you doing there? Where's
Don't you
your
care about
mask?
Granny? Stop seeing her.
You're killing Granny.
Your granny's dead to you. You're never going to see her again.
Shut up.
Well-
She's already dead. You can't go to a funeral to protect Granny.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Go and hug your granny inside a plastic bag. Oh no, you killed her. You're evil. You're going to the concentration camp. You're going to the COVID camp. Speaking of COVID camps, Australia.
Oh, fuck. Australia.
What is it? You know what I figured out finally, and I should have figured this out long time ago. Put it up and I'll tell you. This is the COVID, the girl. COVID camp.
Yeah. Which one do you want to see? We
Whatever.
want to see her. Okay, so
There's a longer interview with her, and we'll link to it in the description, in the show notes description, in case you haven't seen it. She does an interview with a YouTube video with a guy who asks her about her ordeal.
it's a woman. I've forgotten her name, Haley or something. She's interviewed by Freddie Sayers on her.com.
Right.
He does great podcasts and stuff. So in the course of interviews, Freddie Sayers played this clip, which others extracted and it's kind of gone viral now. Let's have a look. This is footage she took while she was under mandatory forced 2-week quarantine lockdown.
in a COVID camp.
Warning that you have to stand above and obey the rules while you get, yeah? And that's, we have to go the rules again. I don't care.
So
what's
am I
happening
allowed
in
to
the
go to the
background.
laundry?
You're allowed to go to the laundry, but you got to wear a mask, yeah?
Yeah, righto.
And you definitely can't go up the fence anywhere else. But you're allowed to go to the laundry, yeah? That's always been the case, yeah?
Right, so if I was sitting just here, which is right near the fence, why are these guys in a cabin that's right near the fence? It makes no sense, does it?
Yeah, but you can't leave your balcony to go to the fence to talk to somebody else. That's what's obvious, yeah?
So if I was
Again,
at
it
that
doesn't have to
balcony,
make sense. So we always say there has to be lines everywhere drawn.
It doesn't have to
yeah?
make sense.
And
There has to be
one of
lines.
the lines is you cannot leave your balcony and you cannot go to someone else. Where it makes no sense or it doesn't seem right to you, that is the line and that's what the law is, yeah? And that's how it goes, yeah?
the law.
It's the law.
There's a law that says
Show
that.
direction, yep, there's a show direction, yeah? And how the
Show
behavior is
direction.
done, especially in this area because it's much more highly infectious and likely to have infected people, yeah?
Highly infectious when all of us people are negative.
So far, that's just very high, yeah?
The risk is still very high.
Can we just do that? Otherwise, the next time it's a $5,000 fine. We don't want to do that.
It's a $5,000 fine if what?
If you breach again.
If I walk out onto that path.
Without your mask on, for
With-
no reason other than the rule.
If I cross that yellow line
saying that you've broken the rule.
that I've broken the rule, I will be issued with a $5,000 fine.
Look at them in their hazmat suits.
Right.
Idiots.
We could even do that now, but we're giving the warning first. Have a chat with you because
We could just give you a $5,000 fine now.
rather just do the right thing, yeah? Like I said, I'm not here to fight with you.
Yeah.
I don't want to fight with you.
Yeah.
I just want everybody to do the right thing, and unfortunately,
Do the right
make
thing,
sure
yeah.
we do. I don't think
So the Germans said,
it's got nothing to do with me. I'm just
Nazi
acting with
Germany,
the rules,
just
yeah.
doing the right thing.
So what did that experience make you think? Like, what was your feeling about being in that situation with those people in control of your every movement?
Oh, it's horrible. It's a horrible feeling. You feel like you're in prison. You feel like you've done something wrong. It's inhumane what they're doing. Like you are so small. They just overpower you, and you're literally nothing.
Okay, some of the backstory to this, people should probably go and look for this, the whole thing. It's just a 20-minute interview he did with her, but the backstory is insane. She lives up there in Northern Territory. She moved there to get away from the insane lockdowns in
Sydney,
Melbourne.
yeah, Melbourne,
Whenever she could, in between all the lockdowns, she managed to get out. She wanted to get out because in the Northern Territory and other places, there were no lockdowns at that point. She gets there. A friend is test positive. For some reason, she probably made a mistake somewhere and offered her name and number up to track and trace because her friend tests positive and she's a contact, so they come around to her house.
Yeah, her friend tested positive and they followed her friend on CCTV to see who she had been in contact with.
Oh, and that's how they got her.
They saw her.
They
stopped to talk to her on her moped, on this girl's moped, and they got her who she was from her license plate on her moped. And they posted up at her house and said, "Listen, you were in contact. Do you know this woman? Yes, she tested positive. You're going to COVID camp."
Not quite. They initially asked her, "Have you had a recent negative PCR test?" And she said, yes. She lied.
And then they looked in the system.
She
found that she wasn't in the system for having had a negative test recently. Called her up and said, you weren't in the system. She admitted,
stay there, we're coming back.
She admitted that she lied, said they were going to come back, and they said someone was going to come and give her a test, but instead the two cops arrived and said, you're going to COVID camp. And she said, what about my negative test? It doesn't matter, you're going to COVID camp.
Yeah,
you can either come with us now and get a $5,000 fine, or we can send the Happy COVID bus to pick you up, and you won't get the fine, and then you have to go. So she goes in through the gates of the COVID camp, and on the back of a golf buggy, and dumped in her
and no one there asked her anything.
Box.
Once you're there, you're not human. There's no human rights.
Every day,
lawyers forget it. Your hut's down here. They put her on a golf buggy.
Yeah,
guy in a hazmat suit. No one wants to go near her.
When she gets there, she's given a COVID test, negative. Doesn't matter. You're staying for 14 days. Every day thereafter, negative COVID test for her and all the others that were there. They even said, and she mentioned that they said that if she was to infringe the rules there about leaving her thing, that they would keep her longer. Yes, I think they'll give her another 14 days. She finally got out and she asked around for questions. I hope that God she got a lawyer at this point, because she finally got a question from an answer from the Australian CDC, kind of off the record, because they didn't know either. Someone there on the end of the phone said to her, "It sounds most likely to us that the reason you were taken to COVID camp was because you lied, and that it was a punishment." There was nothing to do with the virus, whether she had it or not. Nothing to do with health. And that isn't even the worst story out of that Howard Springs quarantine camp this week. The other one is that, fill this up, I have a news report about it, but first we'll just want to have a look at this headline.
Was she vaccinated?
No. I don't think so.
No, she was. She was. Yep. She mentioned in the interview she was. Double vaccinated. Doesn't matter.
Crazy. Check out this headline. This is actually before the story broke, before the story about her.
Yeah.
Teenagers from remote, it's the same facility,
same one.
Northern Territory facility, arrested. Oh, look what they call it, the remote NT community. It's a fucking concentration camp. Were arrested after escape from the facility. And you see there's police, they do a checkpoint and they find them.
Yeah.
And they bring them back.
It's a manhunt for a bunch of kids who had run away from a COVID camp.
And officially, this is a voluntary camp, right?
Yeah.
Here's a news report about it. Australian news, la de la. Just here's some more news. Can you imagine like being in Australia and this is just casually reported as news?
Start with breaking news out of Darwin, where 3 people have escaped from the Howard Springs COVID quarantine facility. Talia Sava's there for us. Talia, good morning. There's a search underway right now.
Yes, that's right, Davina.
These
Good
dangerous
morning to
fugitives.
you. We've been told the trio scaled the fence in the early hours of this morning. Police receiving reports around 4:40 a.m. Now, major police checkpoints have been set up around Howard Springs for the past several hours. As you can see in these pictures, they've been conducting thorough searches in car boots, checking vehicle registrations, cars and buses alike. But in the last half an hour, what we understand is they've actually been dismantled. Exactly why, that hasn't been confirmed. Hopefully, good news. We're also not sure yet who these people are connected with, whether it's a repatriation flight or those Aboriginal community members who have been staying here following the Catherine cluster. Davina, what we do know
it's an abo hunt.
This is definitely going to bring this gold standard facility under
Yeah, don't mention
intense
that too loud.
scrutiny. On Sunday, we had a man escape and found on Darwin's party precinct, and this latest situation is only going to put us under the microscope further.
Not good news. Okay, Talia, thanks.
Not good news, yeah. Terrible. It's kind of like when the slaves off the plantations used to run away and you'd have to go out and hunt them down.
With dogs,
and bring them back. Yeah.
Only
it's
now
a
these
modern,
drones.
It's a modern version of that. Drag you back into the COVID camp.
Well, that's Northern Territory.
You know,
Because you know who's in charge there. He's the guy,
that spitting
nutcase.
Spitting venom guy.
Michael Gunner.
Yeah.
I don't have it to hand. Do you want to hear him?
Jeez. I don't know if I could stomach it again. He's such an angry person.
He kind of does look like, what's his name? Your man from history.
Yeah. Well, I finally figured out why this is happening in Australia, because Australia stands out for this kind of exceedingly draconian bullshit around COVID, and they're getting away with it. But why is it happening in Australia? Australia used to be, not too long ago, a penal colony.
Yeah.
They're just reverting back to form. That's what they were set up for. They're a penal colony. So no, it's no wonder that they're, you know, there's just the atmosphere has lingered there from a couple of hundred years ago.
Yeah.
When prisoners were sent from particularly from the UK and Ireland to Australia.
So there's a certain segment of the population that when this kicked in, they're like, yeah, that feels normal. That's no.
My ancestors used to.
Yeah.
And amongst the people as well, most of them are, you know, the children of, a lot of them would be descendants of, I'm not going to say criminals, but people who were sent to, for penal servitude, you know. So it's just like, it feels natural to them to be locked down in their houses and to have government treat them like they're a bunch of prisoners. Anyway, I'm just joking, sort of.
Well, it's only 100 and some years ago that, yeah.
But you know the whole thing on the vaccines and the myocarditis, right? And there's been people out there, conspiracy theorists out there saying...
Oh, yeah, I read in the news this week that's...
Well, yeah. Conspiracy theorists would say that the vaccines cause myocarditis, right?
Nah.
I don't think it's the case. And it's finally been confirmed by the science and reported by the Evening Standard. It's on MSN.com. It's a heartwarming... pun intended, a heartwarming 300,000. It's a heartwarming, pun intended message from the science. Thank you, the science. Up to 300,000 people facing heart-related illnesses due to post-pandemic stress disorder.
Ah.
You see?
Then we can put a name on it now. It makes sense.
So when you get for the significant number of people who have had unusual bouts of myocarditis, you know, for their health status and their age and everything over the past few months, you may have thought that just because it happened within a few days of getting your second dose of an mRNA vaccine, it's not. It's the stress from the whole pandemic lockdown business, which the COVID did. The COVID did the lockdowns, and the lockdowns did the myocarditis.
I could well believe that stress caused by the lockdowns and all the, you can't see any of your family
Yeah.
business could cause a massive increase in heart issues.
Possibly.
And it certainly
More
then
likely
is compounded by
dementia.
what's happened this year.
Yeah. But it's good to know that it's not the vaccines.
Right.
That even though there's lots of evidence that, and even admitted by official sources that on rare occasions you can have, especially in younger males actually, teenage males, that their chances of getting myocarditis after a mRNA vaccine are something like 6, 7, 8. Well, no, actually it's more. It's maybe a couple of dozen times. It's a large number, greatly increased risk of myocarditis compared to your average risk as a teenage boy of getting myocarditis. Greatly increased risk of getting it after the mRNA vaccine. But again, it's still very rare. So.
It's not the only thing
That's very rare.
they're saying is causing the explosion of heart issues. The other one is cold weather.
Yeah. That'll do it to you.
Yeah, basically the cold weather.
The cold
The
weather.
thing is, there is some truth to that. I actually looked into it. Heart attacks do go up during cold season
Yeah.
versus summer.
They also go up whenever
But-
you roll out an experimental vaccine.
Yeah. What it doesn't do is go up 24 times fold in teenagers.
In teenagers, yeah.
So
But yeah, this is unprecedented. The way that the whole thing has rolled out with this virus just coming on us from a bat, not from a lab, and it just being totally unexpected, and it causing overwhelming the health service and all that kind of stuff. That's totally unprecedented, right? It's never happened before, except Health Service Winter UK.jpg. Except it's unprecedented, except for the past 10 years.
what do those headlines say? 2012.
Zoom in a bit. That's good.
Right.
2012, hospitals full to bursting as bed shortage hits danger level. 2013, hospitals scrambled to prevent crisis in NHS's toughest ever winter. 2014, more patients overstretched doctors. Is the NHS facing a winter crisis? 2015, hospital bed occupancy rates hit record high, risking care. 2016, hospitals in England told to put operations on hold to free up beds. 2017, NHS bosses sound alarm over hospitals already running at 99% capacity. 2018, NHS intensive care units sending patients elsewhere due to lack of beds. 2019, hospital beds at record low in England as NHS struggles with demand. 2020, same story. But in 2020, we had a different response to that. Rather than the response that we had in all of the previous years, which was to go, meh. In 2020, everybody was encouraged to collectively crap their pants.
Yeah, DEFCON 4.
As a result of 24-hour media programming and messaging and propaganda of every single death that could possibly happen anywhere in the country, and assigning all of them, whether it was COVID or not, almost, not all of them, but a lot of them to COVID. So, yeah, well, just on that point, again, a couple of weeks ago we talked about in France, the report from an official French organization that every year puts out a report on activity in French hospitals. And this was discussed in French media openly. No one's questioned it. The report concluded that 2% in 2020, last year, 2% of hospital
beds.
occupancy or hospital admissions were due to COVID. And yet all of last year in France and in every other country, we were told that the health service was collapsing under the weight of COVID patients.
Yeah.
And then the report a year later, more than a year later, says 2%. How do you square it? I'm sure somebody can justify it in some bullshitty kind of way and make up some stats and narrativize it in some way that attempts to justify it, but clearly it's not the case because we know what happened last year. And in fact, there's another, the JPEG hospitals.jpg, Scotty, is a good actual list or rundown of what was actually going on in most hospitals most healthcare systems across the world, really, because of COVID and the hysteria around COVID, you had an abnormally high staff absence. In the UK, this was 30,000 out of 90,000 were at home due to PCR positive isolation. So they just tested positive, had no symptoms, but stay at home. So 1/3 of your staff of your hospital staff were told to stay at home for 2 weeks, and that was a rolling 2 weeks. So every time you tested positive, go home. Socially distanced and isolated wards, exactly the case. A lot of reports you remember from last year of people going into hospitals and saying, "Where's the pandemic? This hospital's empty. It's like a ghost town." Why was that the case? It's because a lot of staff were sent home, but also a lot of people were told they were afraid to go to hospital. They were afraid to leave their homes. They were told to be afraid to leave their homes, and a lot of them were sent home. A lot of the surgeries were cancelled, and they converted hospitals into kind of one small section of a hospital into the COVID ward, and the rest of it, activity in the hospital, was basically mothballed. It was shut down. Another big aspect of the crisis, and that last JPEG we just showed you of those headlines, shows that in most, certainly in the European Union, in a lot of countries, governments have been cutting back on healthcare funding. They've been reducing beds over and over and again, year after year after year. They've been reducing
as
the number of
demand
beds.
increases.
As the population increases, they've been reducing beds. So healthcare systems across Europe and a lot of other countries in the world are in a terrible state because they're underfunded by the government. So of course you're going to have a crisis at any given moment. In fact, under normal circumstances, you have a crisis for a lot of people going to hospitals in terms of being able to get treatment. So the whole kind of the challenge of creating the whole COVID testing with PCR testing and all that kind of stuff, ramped it up, and all the PP, protective, blah, blah, equipment, PP something, whatever it is. PPE, there is significant PPE and testing, extra process, staffing on makeshift wards to increase bed capacity to make up for the fact that there were none, or that they'd cut back on it, increase in seriously unwell patients due to halting and restricting healthcare since March 20, increase in injury and accidents compared to March, total shutdown, flu patient protocol replaced with more demanding COVID patient protocol. They were increasing increasing numbers of long stay patients because they didn't want to send them back home or back to care homes, although they did that in a lot of cases and just dumped them in care homes.
Check out number 15. The NHS was 40,000 short of staff prior to the pandemic.
Right.
That's why you had all those headlines year on year.
Right.
So you're 40,000 down already. Then it strikes, and a third are then not working.
Yeah, that's the reason. It's got nothing to do with COVID, with this virus. And as we know, from the very beginning, or soon after the beginning of this nonsense, when governments reacted in this hysterical way as if it was some kind of bioterror attack, and in fact we've talked about that before, that's indicative of, well, that's something that gets closer to a real fundamental truth about this, is that the way governments reacted around the world initially, as if it was in fact they did, a lot of them activate, they didn't say this publicly, but a lot of them did activate their bioterror or biowarfare attack protocols. We saw that in Italy when you had the military coming in, and in other European countries as well, the military coming in to take bodies away. That is like one of the core aspects of a bioterror attack protocol, where the military takes over and starts removing bodies because these bodies are, well, they're contaminated, right, with this deadly pathogen, right? So there is evidence that governments did react as if it was a bioterror attack. Now, the only way they would think it was a bioterror attack if they got clear evidence or got confirmation from people who looked at this under a microscope that this was man-made.
Yeah.
That's the only way they would activate a bioterror attack. If they said this is not natural, it's artificial, we don't know what it is, we need to activate DEFCON, whatever, 5, 1, 2, 0, whatever it is. But very quickly, after a month, maximum 2 months, or probably even shorter than that, but let's give them a couple of months, it was very clear that this virus was a nothing burger. It's a coronavirus. It's a bit more transmissible. It's maybe a little bit more, has maybe a slightly higher mortality rate, whatever, but generally speaking, it's a coronavirus. It's nothing to get worried about. And they knew that. But since then, so I'm talking about since April, May last year, they ran with the whole hysteria and this is a deadly pandemic and a deadly virus when they knew it wasn't. And that's absolutely 100% clear. And people can see that today. People didn't believe us when we were saying that that last year, but they should believe it now.
Yeah.
Because we've just heard about Omicron. We talked about it last week. Omicron, whatever.
Oh my God.
The Oh my God variant. Supposedly out of South Africa, but probably not, because it was already found in other countries before they announced it in South Africa. So they call it South Africa. It's bullshit. These variants, mutations happen all the time, and mutations are invariably deleterious in terms of the efficacy of the virus, i.e. it gets weaker with each mutation. And true to form, at least in South Africa, the doctor who kind of ID'd it first, was first to speak up about it, even though it was in other countries. She said, very mild, gives you a bit of a headache. That was the official story. And it was a day of that floating around, and then suddenly
it was used to justify
DEFCON -1. DEFCON. We got to do something to stop the spread of Omicron. It's dangerous. Ireland has just recently, on the basis of that, Ireland, for example, has announced that for a month, so over the whole Christmas period until into January, all nightclubs closed, 50% capacity in restaurants and bars, social distancing in restaurants and bars, all sorts of semi-lockdown procedures on the basis of that. Now, somebody please explain to me how can you not smell a rat with that whole situation? How can you not respond to that and go, what do you mean? Why are you doing that on the basis of... No one has said that this so-called new scariant is something to be concerned about.
Yeah.
They said the opposite.
Well,
so why are you...
Funny you say of concern. That's exactly what they did say. The official WHO statement was something like, this is fine, we don't know what it does yet, blah, 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 mealy mouth, but it's of concern. And they just took that, of concern, and other strategy, the CDC in the United States. Fauci has been all over the media again this week about Omicron, of concern, of concern, of concern, of concern. You just repeat that bland statement of concern enough. Given all that's come before, that's all they have to say. And they'll get away with it. Like in a court of law, if you were to test them now on, right, okay, state of play right now, is this or is not a deadly variant?
Mm-hmm.
And they say, well, no, like refer to what I just said. And he'll get away with it. He'll say, he indeed did not say anything that could plausibly be seen in a court of law as causing hysteria or undue damage to anyone else. But this thing is running on this inertia. They don't need to make any scary statements anymore.
Right.
They just need to say of concern.
So more lockdowns and more restrictions and more vaccine mandates on the basis of nothing. How can people not see that? How can people not see?
Who doesn't? How many people? That's what's getting a bit. We know now that a third of the European Union as a whole is not vaccinated.
But as they push it further and further, as they come up with more and more implausible explanations or reasons why they need to continue lockdowns, how many people are who's going to be left? What bunch of kind of brain dead people out there who don't know shit from Shinola, don't know their arse from their elbow. How many of those are out there, type of thing? Who will say, well, the government says we should lock down because, stuff.
Well,
so I'm gonna
on the basis of Omicron in Ireland last week during the freeze, which hit there much harder than it did here. The government announced that all schools, all schools, doesn't matter what age they are, 3 years old, 10 years old, 18 years old, had to open open at least one window in every single classroom. The kids weren't allowed to wear coats. Why? Because you have to wear a school uniform in most of the schools. No coats. Coats outside. The coats have always been outside. That's an old rule. We can't just break that rule just because of the COVID. But they get into the classroom. It's freezing. They're frozen. They're cold. They get sick. They want to go home. By the end of last week, something like a third of the entire country's school children were at home sick. Because the windows had to be cracked open. Because we must circulate the air because of this new variant. That's my question. Who were the parents going along with this?
Yeah, who are they?
They see the physical harm. And by the way, the Irish government just announced this is also brand new last week to fight COVID general, not on the basis of Omicron. All kids in all those classrooms, they're frozen cold, must all wear a mask for the first time.
Right.
That's been elsewhere in other countries, in other districts, but nationwide in Ireland, all school children are now wearing a mask.
So there's no justification for those measures, right? No plausible justification for it. You can't even get a plausible justification for it.
They won't give you one.
And for the mandates, for mandating, for segregating unvaccinated, from locking down unvaccinated, from preventing them from participating in society, and then trying to force unvaccinated people to actually fine them if they don't get a vaccine. What's the justification for that? Justification for that is, I haven't read anything specific. I haven't heard anybody give a clear, concise explanation as to what your problem is with unvaccinated people. All I get is that there's some vague idea that maybe unvaccinated people are causing mutations. Have you heard that?
Yeah. Rings a bell.
That's the only reason, right?
Yeah. That's what they were saying all summer.
Right.
They don't refer to that anymore. That messaging is done, so to speak.
But so it's not just
it's
like
now pushed back in the unconscious.
It's an everybody knows situation
Yes.
right now, right? Where it's just everybody knows.
Yeah.
There's no more thinking needed. It's just everybody knows that this is the way things are.
Yeah, we've been through all that. We explained that last summer.
Right, but yeah, and as it develops, it doesn't matter if things change.
And
Just carry on.
You saw how. Think back to our reports on this during the summer. We'd had a warning from YouTube about medical misinformation, so we were trying to say, okay, so officially what they're saying is, here's their claim. They want to push the vaccines harder because, / everyone must get vaccinated, because it looks like, because they never quite claimed it outright. They said it looks like mutations are occurring in the unvaccinated. And so we had to deal with that claim, take it and say, well, maybe that's not the case. If you consider there's maybe other, we couldn't just go say that's bullshit at the time because.
Well, we could have, and we did, I think, or certainly we intimated it, because you throw up Quantum magazine, and this has been around this is just one example of many scientific, this is a report, but this is one of many reports of different types, either pure scientific papers or reports in those scientific papers. Vaccines are pushing pathogens to evolve. Just as antibiotics breed resistance in bacteria, vaccines can incite changes that enable diseases to escape their control, i.e. viruses. So you don't need to read the article, but basically that's the science, right? That it's been known for a very long time that vaccines, when you vaccinate in the presence of a circulating virus, that you force it to mutate. Now, again, the thing is that mutations, generally speaking, are deleterious. They reduce function of the original virus, and it becomes less transmissible and less virulent, less of a problem. But if you throw up, there's another angle to this in terms of vaccinations and viruses. If you throw up the PubMed one that was just before that, I think. This is just one. You can look at this. There's plenty of others that show this. It talks about recombination. There's a different thing to mutations, driving mutations through kind of vaccine resistance. This is recombination of vaccines, which is basically the idea that whenever you introduce a vaccine or vaccinate, introduce a virus, basically, especially mRNA viruses, because of the way they act and spread around the body into cells as well, that they can recombine or can combine with the virus that is in the vaccine, can combine with other viruses and produce a more virulent strain. So it's kind of like that. This is the reality of what people think.
Not so much
mutations do.
Yeah.
Mutations are deleterious, but recombination
is actually a new virus.
Is like it's like gain of function. It's one way you can actually
happening organically in the body.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this one was for pigs. Basically, a virus that had was pretty devastating to pig populations whenever it spread through the pig population. And this study shows that when they vaccinated the pigs against this porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome, PRRS, with a strain of that in a vaccine, that it produced an entirely new strain, like a new virus effectively, that was much deadlier than the original one.
That's why I stress
recombination.
new virus. I suppose
Yeah.
because all people are hearing about is variants,
Right.
which are the naturally increasingly deleterious versions
Mutations.
that kind of spread it out and make it less.
Yeah.
That's a new variant of SARS-CoV-2. But here you're talking about the recombination of a
Yeah.
virus that would not be SARS-CoV-2. It would be a new class. It would be its own.
It would be SARS-CoV-3.
It would be something.
Like that. It would still be the same virus, but it would be souped up basically but by a combination of
Yes.
very effective
a
aspects.
retrovirus that
of
somebody
both
is
viruses.
carrying, because
Yeah.
we're all our body's 40% virus or
Yeah.
more, something like
It's
that.
basically gain of function happening naturally, but again, it's not natural because it's exactly the same. When you do gain of function in a lab, right, which they did on this coronavirus to release it probably in Fort Detrick, they were doing gain of function research. They released it into the public. Because when it happens naturally as a natural function of interaction with your people's immune systems, when viruses are challenged by people's immune systems and they mutate, they become less effective at infecting. They become worse. They become crappier viruses, right? That happens nearly all the time. It's very, very rare that anything would have a gain of function naturally in that situation.
Yeah.
The only way you get gain of function is with intelligent design, basically. We have a human being who tweaks a virus to deliberately make it better or worse, let's say, more virulent, more transmissible than the original virus. That can happen naturally in a way, but again, it's not natural because it's pretty much the same thing. When they do the gain of function research in a lab, it's the same process more or less happens as when you take a vaccine that you've made in a lab, inject it into someone, and it combines in their bodies, in their cells, with another virus. And then you can get a gain of function happening, quote unquote, naturally, but it's not natural because there's an intelligent aspect of it, a human intelligence, by injecting the vaccine that was designed in a lab into the body.
Yeah.
So it's a gain of function research in a lab and in the body. Both of them involve vaccines, essentially, or human designed viruses or human tweaked viruses. The vaccine is a human tweaked virus. It combines in your body with an existing virus. And people can do that in a lab, and scientists do it all the time in gain of function research, where they add something to a virus in a lab to make it more transmissible or make it human transmissible, as in the case of SARS-CoV-2. They take a bat virus or a virus that was only seen in bats before, and they take it, add what's it called, the furin cleavage site,
Yeah.
that made it possible to infect humans rather than just bats. So that's a real danger with the whole
Just
vaccination
before we
campaign.
came on, we listened to it was an interview with an epidemiologist on French TV, and the gist of the analogy when the presenter was pushing back on his warning about the dangers of viral recombination, he said, "Look, your analogy of the likelihood of this happening being so low, it's like winning the lottery. There's a problem with that analogy. If you push the vaccine on everyone, you're massively increasing the odds of
Someone
lottery
going to win.
winners out there. And thereafter, okay, so you've only got a few instances out there and the billions of people have been vaxxed. But it's not then just an isolated case, well, we'll find it and contain it. No, it's a new virus. It will escape your containment measures and or your vaccine. It will have vaccine escape because it's no longer SARS-CoV-2 variant number XYZ. It's now SARS-CoV-3. And there's nothing. No one has defense. There's no natural antibodies, no vaccine against it.
Right.
You've unleashed a different beast.
Yeah. His analogy of the lottery was that imagine you have a lottery and 6-number lottery in one country or something like that, but you gave everybody in the world a ticket.
Right.
How many winning lottery tickets are you going to have? How many people are going to pick the right numbers? A lot more than if you reduce it and limit it to a number of people. And that's why he was saying it's his responsibility to try and reduce that number by not being vaccinated. He's doing his civic duty to not contribute to the chances of this happening by staying unvaccinated.
Right. Yeah. That was a good part. The presenter just cut him off when he was trying to give a scientific explanation of viral recombination. Said, "Have you been vaccinated, by the way?" Put him on the spot, and he goes, "No." And he goes, "Why?"
He said,
and he says, "Well, here's why.
Yeah.
I'm doing my bit, my social responsibility to lower the chances of us unleashing
a mutant, a super mutant."
Which brings us back to Geert van den Bosch's warning that doing this during the pandemic is going to create viral escape, and then we'll seriously be screwed. And it was I'm the layman, right? My first, at the very beginning of this was no, because it's going to have two negative effects. One, it's going to add to the chances of viral recombination producing a mutant freak, which really is more dangerous than the seasonal flu. And two, if I take it to do my part in quotes, I'm less able to defend myself in that scenario.
Yeah, somebody has to survive to turn on push the buttons on the nuclear power station to keep the lights on, if everybody else falls ill, with some new virus,
Yeah.
there's got to be some people as a result of the vaccine, because there is an aspect to it that the vaccine itself, especially mRNA vaccines, are fine-tuning or honing your immune system to look specifically only at the spike protein, thereby reducing your normal broad spectrum immunity, the way your immune system works naturally against the viruses, which it takes a broad look at the whole virus and it develops immunity to all different parts of it, so that if any of those parts appear anywhere else in any other virus, it'll know to attack them. But if you train your immune system to only look for the spike protein, then you're limiting its scope of action or its scope of defense against it's depriming it essentially in the way that it's been optimized naturally. There is a risk that people who are actually vaccinated, especially with the mRNA vaccines, are setting themselves up to be in a vulnerable position to some kind of a new recombined virus down the road.
If we ever do need people to take over the nuclear plants, I'm your man, because I've watched that Chernobyl TV show. I know not what not to do.
Don't push all the buttons at once. Yeah. Don't push the big red one.
You got to make sure that the rods don't
Come
go
out.
in and out too fast. Yeah, you got to pull them. But fine, I'll handle it. I got steady arms. I can, you know.
You could go in there in your lead suit or something and pull the rods out yourself if there's a meltdown happening. Like Spock in what was that Star Trek movie? Yeah, you'd be like Spock. But he survived, so it's all good. Anyway, last word on polls. Funny thing on polls.
The Polish people.
No, polls, P-O-L-L-S. DW.com. That's Die Welt, the world in German. Majority of Germans in favour of mandatory COVID vaccine, according to polls.
God.
Maybe true, maybe not.
Here's my question. The Swiss just had a vote on this. An actual honest-to-God referendum poll. Supposedly 2/3, again, it does reflect the official stats on 2/3 of Europeans having taken the vaccines. Is that poll then accurate? Was the Swiss referendum legit? 2/3 of them said, govern me harder, daddy. The Swiss, they love their freedom.
They love a bit of governing. MSN.com, in Massachusetts anyway, residents support COVID vaccine mandates from employers and schools. Will vaccinate children. Will vaccinate.
Have children, will jab.
And then if you just go to COVID France, JPEG, this one though throws a bit of a doubt over the whole thing, because if you read, so that looks like 60% of public polled support lockdown for non-vaccinated, but then you read the subheading and it's many unvaccinated people, 40% of those polled also said they would be in favour of such a move.
Lock me down.
So
govern me harder, daddy.
It's like, I don't want to take the vaccine, but I want to be locked down for not taking the vaccine.
And vilified and isolated from society,
So it's a bit of sadomasochism maybe or something going on there. People wanting to be abused in some way. Like
I can kind of understand the sentiment in that.
Yeah.
I don't want anything to do with their society. They've turned the culture to shit. I don't really want to be engaged.
Yeah, but
with
would you want to be locked down? Would you push the button for yes, lock me down because I'm not vaccinated?
No, but I don't mind that they voluntarily keep away from me.
Oh, those ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I still want to be able to go out and do things.
I just find it difficult to believe that poll in particular. That 60%
That's
of
dodgy.
those polled,
That's definitely dodgy.
60% of maybe the vaccinated people said lock down the unvaccinated, but 40% of the unvaccinated said lock me down too. I agree with him. I should be locked down. I'm a danger to society. Lock me down now, for my own safety. Who knows? Why don't you just lock yourself down? What do you need the government to tell you to lock down for? Just lock yourself down if you feel that way about it.
I doubt the Swiss referendum result. Just a hunch.
Yeah.
No, I have nothing to go on.
Well, I seriously doubt all of these polls. Like
the polls,
yeah. I mean, in the current context, in the current climate, you can't really believe anything that comes out of government. Because, I mean, they're all saying that they're putting all these
Look at
measures
the
in
size
place.
of the protests.
But yeah, and they say specifically that they're putting all these lockdown or segregation measures in place in order to force people to get vaccinated. You know, so it's the locking down isn't about health anymore. They've almost recognized that segregating people and telling people to stay in their homes isn't about stopping the spread, because they recognize that they must recognize, because everybody else recognizes, that people are vaccinated spread and transmit, or carry and transmit as much virus as unvaccinated people. So there's no point in locking down the unvaccinated there in terms of stopping the spread. Every vaccinated and unvaccinated are spreading as much as each other.
Yeah.
So, and we've just debunked the idea that unvaccinated people are causing mutations, and especially if you look at the Omicron thing, the woman in South Africa who discovered the first 4 people there, the 4 of them were all vaccinated. So if it came from them, which it didn't, but even going with that narrative, it further pokes holes in the idea that the vaccinated are somehow not spreading or even causing mutations or whatever. So there's no reason for health reasons, there's no reason to lock down or segregate unvaccinated people. The only reason to impose those threats that you're going to be prevented from going to restaurants and bars and engage in society, the only reason to impose that threat on unvaccinated people is so they get vaccinated. For what purpose? We don't have a reason. There is no reason at this point that we can find or that I've seen anywhere.
There's no epidemiological
There's no
reason.
health reason to force people to get vaccinated. So there's some other reason. And the first protocol in that respect is money. Right? We just looked at Ursula von
der Leyen.
Her husband, actively
Yeah.
the director of medicine for a company that is selling these products.
Yeah.
And she wants to force people to buy these products, basically. Well,
Okay,
use
that's
public money.
Yeah, that's from the top, but from the bottom, is there this? You said at the outset of the show you wanted to talk about what's motivating people. You've done it a bit in past shows. Do you have some new insight on that?
There's probably a lot to it. I mean, some people. I mean, there's a term. I know people probably listen to this probably know the term transmarginal inhibition. It's basically it's well known. It goes back to Pavlov and his experiments. Pavlov did experiments on humans as well as dogs. He's well known for his experiments on dogs, where he subjected them to electric shocks.
He was a Soviet scientist, was he?
Yeah.
A bit sadistic.
Yeah, but he did it on humans as well, and it's about conditioning animals or humans to pain. And he found that different people had different levels of tolerance. He said the most basic inherited difference among people was how soon they reached this shutdown point, and that those quick to shut down have a fundamentally different type of nervous system. So this might explain, at least for some people, there's some people out there who are very kind of like fragile nervous systems, and that the whole, especially last year in March, April, May, and the fear and loathing and terror and that people were subjected to had an enduring effect on people. That has
They were
given
conditioned
them
into relieving the stress by saying yes sir at each step.
Well, they just go into like a kind of freeze state, if you know what I mean, and they kind of it ends up like post-traumatic stress disorder. They're made almost perpetually kind of nervous. Their underlying nervous disposition was being brought to the fore because of this, this targeted fear-based messaging and the inculcation of fear within them, and it was just too much for their stress, their nervous systems, and they have a kind of nervous breakdown of one description or another, and then it has kind of very long-lasting effects, especially when you apply later, even months later, when you apply the same kind of stimulus, they will go back into that kind of fight or flight kind of response where there's no thinking and it's just emotional responses, or doing whatever they can to alleviate the stress that they're feeling. And of course, government is offering the answers as to how to alleviate that stress, is giving them, but of course it doesn't. So it's almost like sadistic on the part of the government, where it's not actually trying to help those people. It's actually repeatedly or periodically subjecting them to the original stimulus that created this response within them. And then every few months, they're told in different ways something. They're programmed again with a bit of fear to evoke that fear-based response, which again it just shuts them down. In Pavlov's experiments with dogs and people, the dogs just went into. It's interesting because the dogs obviously just go into a kind of like a state where they just stop.
They're
stop
alert.
responding.
They're awake.
They-
Their
yeah, of course.
eyes are open,
Yeah,
but they're
they
also
stop-
not there.
They stop responding.
Catatonic
They stop
state.
responding to the. But interestingly, they actually there's an inversion of it, where they actually it's the paradoxical phase, where small stimuli receive major responses.
All right.
So there's 3 stages, right? Equivalent phase, when the response matches the stimuli. So you subject a person to electric shock and they jump up and go, what the hell was that? Oh, and that's normal. But then you continue to do it periodically. And then you get into a paradoxical phase where it's called quantity reversal, where a small stimuli receives a major response. So you just touch people on the arm, no electric shock, and they freak out.
Yeah.
Or a major stimuli, so you subject them to a serious shock and they have no response, you know. So it's a complete inversion of the way people are should be programmed to respond. Like if I just touch you on the arm, you shouldn't freak out. But if I take a 4x4 and whack you around the side of the head, you should respond quite strongly.
Yeah.
But you do the opposite. I touch you on the arm and you freak out as though I had just hit you with something.
Yeah.
But when I hit you with something, you just kind of like carry on and go, this is fine.
Right.
Now place that into society today and what's going on.
Right. Yeah. They're kind of. They've
actually,
been
the
put
third-
into an altered state.
There's a third one, ultra paradoxical, the final stage, which, and this is interesting as well, is associated with quality reversal, where negative stimulation results in positive responses.
You start to
Govern
want
me,
it.
govern me
harder,
govern
Daddy.
me harder, Daddy.
Right, right.
So, I mean, it's very interesting, and that's obviously just the Wikipedia page on it. It's quite short, but there's an awful lot of long-standing literature on TMI, transmarginal inhibition, post-traumatic stress disorder, and the way. I mean, they've had with wars and all that kind of stuff over the past 100 years. Anyway, they've had lots of opportunity to study this and to write up on it, and they can. And I'm surprised that more people haven't actually gone into this and looked at this kind of conditioning. And I mean, when it happens through quote unquote natural causes, war or some kind of trauma that just befalls people and how they respond to it, and draw the comparison to what's happening today, and then look at it not in the context of COVID just befalling people as if it was a war or something like that, or some kind of natural catastrophe, but rather how the government is continuing to impose these trauma-inducing measures beyond any reason on the population. And you start to see that actually the government is doing this on purpose to the people in order to condition them in this way, that they effectively, they become just like reaction machines, and they can be, they're puppets. I mean, they can be made to react. A lot of them can be made to react in a very predictable way.
Yeah.
And that's control. And that's what we've been saying all along, is that governments are not in the business of helping people or looking after people. They're in the business of controlling people. Always have been.
And it means that a lot of people at the outset were fragile.
Yes. It varies among the population. It depends on the person's natural nervous system, just their natural constitution, you know.
But the real horror of it is, what is the science that underpins all of this? The key philosophical tenet of science today is scientific materialism, which is the survival of the fittest. They would see it as, what would a materialist would say? Well, if you're that fragile and weak, see ya. Because they've shafted the elderly. They're going to shaft people stage by stage, group after group. And you're going to see like what they really think. By the end of this, what they really think of people.
Yeah, and it's interesting to consider it in terms of this kind of psychological conditioning that people have been subjected to over the past 18 months, but also the kind of conditioning that they're doing to people's immune systems, which I talked about 10 minutes ago. How the vaccines may be conditioning people's immune systems to be more fragile and less robust than they naturally would be. And they're doing that at a psychological level, and they're even doing it with vaccines, I would suggest.
The two probably go hand in hand, don't they?
At an internal immune system level, yeah. Health, basically, your natural human health. Yeah, it's all pretty... I mean, as we go through this process of trying to figure out what's really going on and looking at it from an objective point of view and not, unencumbered by the belief that the government is our mommy and daddy and they must be good. We can never believe that the government would ever do something. We don't have any prejudices in that respect. We simply look at the situation almost like outside observers or anthropologists, if you know what I mean, to a certain extent. We try to anyway. And the more we look at it, and as time goes on, it seems to be that our analysis of it, that it's abusive, that people are in an abusive relationship with government, that it's abusive parents, basically. They're not nice people. That is being borne out. That hypothesis is being borne out. That is actually what we're dealing with, if you look at it objectively. But many people can't look at it objectively because they have a deep-seated emotional need to feel that the authority in their life is a good authority. It has to be a good authority. Imagine you had to live under an evil authority. I mean, it would actually be a lot better if the governments were openly evil, you know. They all kind of like donned black hats and, you know, did mwah every now and again. We're going to punish you, you know. If they were open about it, people would be able to respond a lot better. And people have talked about that, and people we know who lived under the Soviet system and stuff, they said that the difference then was that people knew.
Everyone knew.
That it was bullshit.
Yeah.
They knew all of the missives were nonsense and knew that it was all just lies, and they just went along and everybody...
They complied
quietly.
just enough not to get beaten or thrown in jail.
Right, which isn't very nice, but it's arguably better in a certain sense.
Oh yeah, they will also say they were much more free then than they are now.
Than what's going on today with people believing that an abusive parent, i.e. government, is actually working in their best interest or loves them. That's not a good place to be. Can't think of... From a societal point of view, I can't think of much worse, you know. Anyway, so it's all been happy and pink, fluffy unicorns dancing.
We ended up
on
doing
rainbows.
COVID the whole show.
No, we didn't.
Yeah, we did. And there are other things happening.
Tiki torches, what's going on?
The Maxwell trial began.
Ah, Jesus.
There's no great revelations, but it's weird because the Daily Mail, in parallel, published a report this week based on FOIA request. I think they discovered Jeffrey Epstein
is still alive.
No.
On the moon with Elvis.
Together with Ghislaine Maxwell, visited the White House 17 times.
Under Bill Clinton.
In the first 2 years of his...
Slick Willie?
Slick Willie.
Who else was he going
Who the hell was Jeffrey Epstein in 1992 and 3 and 4?
He's been around a long
He
time.
had just fled just before it went to trial. He somehow got away with it. A massive Ponzi scheme collapse.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't the Mr. Big Shot then. Says further down.
But he got a shoe into the White House somehow.
He got a
70
shoe in.
times.
Do you want to know how? It says in the report.
Mossad. Israel. Yeah,
Kind
getting
of.
closer to Israel.
Kind of.
ADL.
British socialite Lynn Forrester.
Who is
introduced
Jewish.
Jeffrey Epstein to Bill Clinton, then newly president. Lynn Forrester. They left out
Who's she?
the second barrel in a double barrel surname. Lynn Forrester Rothschild.
Oh, Jesus.
Wife.
See, now you're way down the rabbit hole there. See you later.
Lady, also known as Lady de Rothschild, wife of the top dog in the family. So yeah, Israel, sort of.
Yeah.
Sort of.
You will not replace us.
We start with the Jews and ends up with the Jews, and we didn't even talk about the Jews.
Well, that's the way it always goes, right? And they're just there in the background, you know. Is that going to get us banned from YouTube? Shh.
We're just...
remove that last part.
We're not saying anything about this.
We're just saying.
The Daily Mail said this, and we're just noting that they said it.
We're not saying, but we're just saying.
That's crazy. He was a nobody then.
Yeah. No,
he
but
really
it's the
was.
whole
He got his money. He was introduced. He had already become Lex
Luthor.
Lex Wexner's.
Yeah.
He was an oligarch in Ohio.
Yeah.
He was his money man, but he was only like a year on the job.
Yeah, but all you need is a recommendation from someone like Rothschild, and boom.
But then, what justifies 17 visits in 2 years? They don't say, of course, but that's because everyone knows that Clinton was on the Lolita Express 26 times after he left from 2000.
I already said this, I think, previously, but the broad explanation of what Epstein was up to was that, yeah, Ponzi scheme beforehand, but basically a financier and he's basically financial advisor to the rich and famous, right? That's what he's been doing for the past 20 years.
Yeah.
Financial advisor to the rich and famous. His name gets spread around hey, have you talked to Epstein about that? Because, you know, Panama Papers, offshoring, all that kind of stuff. He was facilitating that for all of these people. Beyonce, all the people you see on the list, and you go, oh my God, Beyonce is a paedophile, and Jake Gyllenhaal is a paedophile, and
Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks is a paedophile. No, they weren't. They're interested in doing what all of them were doing, as the Panama Papers and others showed.
Keeping the tax man at bay.
And it's all legal. So they could all do it. They're all good people. But, of course, you have the Ghislaine, is that her name, Ghislaine?
Ghislaine, I think it's silent.
Maxwell, her father, Mossad.
Oh, yeah, her father.
Israeli intelligence rings within the US, of which there are many, spread diffusely like a cancer. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Spread diffusely
like a network.
Like an octopus. Oh, shit. Like
an organized network, an organized crime. No, it's just a network.
Just a nice network throughout American politics, has been for a very long time. We talked about JFK last week and Israel a little bit. But anyway, so for a very long time. And that is one way that they collect, gain influence over American politics, is through connections, meeting people, getting tie-ins with people by doing them favors, offshoring their money to bank accounts, finding out if they have any particular predilections for young boys or girls, or even teenage boys or girls, or whatever.
As you do.
All sorts of opportunities for blackmail. You don't need it. You just collect it. Full spectrum dominance, total information awareness, as much as possible. Get it on everybody, because you never know when you'll need it, right? And the people, and you present yourself as just wanting to help somebody mutually. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It's all good. You know, we make some money. It's all good. Yeah. And then you find out afterwards that, oh, you know, we have some dirt on you.
It's really not a mystery.
That's what Epstein was about, of course. Yeah. And of course, that's why he was offed. You know what I mean? Because it goes deeper than that, obviously, in the kind of stuff he was up to, and what a lot of the politicians and stuff that were associated with him were up to.
Meeting Bill Gates 5 times.
Yeah, it wouldn't look good, basically. And it doesn't even have to be paedophilia. You know what I mean? It can be anything. I mean, imagine how exposed a lot of those people would be. People think it's always paedophilia, but it's like if a sitting politician was shown to have had an affair with an 18-year-old girl that he met at Epstein's house, it's legal. Mm-hmm. He's just accused of adultery, but he loses his job. Yeah. So that's more than enough for leverage.
Or even to be even to have just gone to the house.
Yeah,
where all those other things have taken place.
Yeah. So that's him. Yeah.
A couple of other minor items. CNN fired Chris Cuomo.
Awesome.
The Waukesha driver who mowed down all those people 2 weeks ago.
That was an SUV.
He got an interview with the local Fox News channel, and he said he feels demonized. By all the negative attention. So the best response I saw to that was a guy called Dermot M on Twitter. He says, that's because people keep calling him a car. Vroom, vroom.
They're assuming his identity, his gender identity. What if he identifies as a car?
Finally, Donald Trump was right again. Number 1,676 times. Yeah, 1776. Interesting, I chose that number unconsciously because he warned when they were starting to take down statues 2 years ago, look, where's this going to end? They're going to take down Thomas Jefferson next? And people were like, what? No.
Never.
No, only the people who lost in the Civil War, of course. You know, the real racists. Well, lo and behold, New York Post, the Thomas Jefferson statue was removed from New York City Hall after 187 years because of its connections to slavery.
Awesome.
So, yeah, one of the founders of the country wrote the freaking Constitution, which kind of tells you a lot about what they think about the Constitution at this point. You know, no, he wrote that thing, get him out of here.
Yeah. So. We're in the after times. That was the before times.
After times. Post-truth, post-fact, post-constitution, post-legal, anything. They all know it's completely illegal. Finally, the First Minister in Wales was caught in a hot mic. We won't play it. Maybe we'll play it next week. But he was caught in a hot mic saying, oh, shit. He's talking to his advisor next to him, right? He's saying they're discussing the legislation. They're about to basically another lockdown. And he says to the advisor to his side, he says, so what happens if some bright spark figures out or asks the question whether this is should as in
law
is law or should as in advice? And the advisor goes, they're already asking that. And he goes, oh, shit.
Yeah.
They know this is bluff.
Yeah.
They know there's not a legal ground for this to stand on. It doesn't matter whether the UK, the US, Europe, Australia.
Like all of us
that
anti-constitutional.
guy in the camp. It's the law. There is no law.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's completely illegal.
So you comply if you want to, basically. You only comply out of ignorance, basically. If you understand the situation, then you don't comply.
If you find yourself in a predicament where you just couldn't get away from a fine or some other punitive measure, you do your damnedest to get a lawyer, lawyer up, and you will have your day in court eventually, and you'll win.
Yeah,
even the White House is losing in court with what it wants to do.
Yeah, people don't understand that they don't have to be part of this reality that they're attempting to foist on us. You either choose to be part of it or you choose not to be part of it, and there is a big element of choice, but that choice has to be informed. You know, or you can only really make that choice when you inform yourself about the entire situation and the reality of the situation. Then it's much more easy to make the choice to not be part of it, because who wants to be part of a clown show? It's a joke, you know.
Yeah.
You want to take the big top tent and the clowns and you know, the rolling around with squirty flowers and stuff. You want to believe that's all real, then go ahead. If you really think that's real, fine. But if you have any sense, it's a clown show, and you need to see it in that way. And then you don't actually, you know, you don't put on your big red wig and your giant shoes and become a clown yourself.
Yeah, you sit back, watch the clowns.
And go, that was nice.
Wonder what they'll do next.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
all right.
What will they do next?
We will see. It's going to be Christmas soon. Is it? No. A few weeks late.
Yeah, Christmas.
Yeah.
Lockdowns.
Christmas lockdowns, yeah.
Maybe.
No
Boris
Santa.
is going to announce on the 18th.
Santa's gay.
Santa's gay in Norway?
Yeah. It's gay Santa in Norway.
He's making out with your daddy?
Yeah. Just, be careful on Christmas Eve. We'll give another warning closer to the time, but if you're in Norway or maybe anywhere else.
And you
Santa's
see a man with a big beard and a red hat, stay away.
No, if you see him kissing your daddy.
Unless you're inclined that way, of course.
Yeah, don't be surprised, you know. It's post-truth. It's the after times. That was before times. It was before times when Santa was straight. Now he's gay in the after times. It's all good. We'll be back. Thanks for... Is there anything in the chat room? You weren't watching it.
Not really.
I saw Anita say she's hearing from lots of people who were vaxxed once or twice over the last year. They're like, I ain't doing that ever again. So based on what they've learned since or what they've directly felt from the shots since.
Traveller Ryan came up with a good explanation, or a good description there of the Israeli networks in America. Instead of an octopus or cancer, it's like a cancerous octopus. I think that's better. It strikes a more reasonable note. More evil accents, please. Evil accents. We did mostly German accents. Are you saying something about the Germans? Terrible. For Germans. Okay. So anyway, listen, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for keeping the chat going, and liking and watching and listening, whatever you're doing. Subscribe if you haven't. We appreciate it, and we'll be back next week with another roundup of what the hell has been going on. And we'll try and figure it out in the meantime, and we'll bring it to you straight into your brains next week, next Sunday. See you then. Bye.
Thanks for watching. Bye all.
Can't stop the signal now.